First, we look at North America, which is a region made up of only two countries, the United States and Canada. Canada happens to be the second largest country in area in the world, second only to Russia. It's a pretty large country, bigger than the US. And of course, here we have the US. And let's look at some of the physical features, some of the main features that we see in North America. Notice that this map shows elevation, so the brown and tan colors represent higher elevations, the lighter beige and green colors represent lower elevations. So here we see Rocky Mountains on the western side of the continent or the region. And the Rocky Mountains extend all the way from Canada through the United States. They're the highest mountain range in North America. West of the Rocky Mountains, we see a very mountainous territory. So the Great Basin, for instance, territory in Nevada. We see the coastal mountain ranges. We see the Cascade Mountains in the Pacific Northwest. We have the Sierras here in California. So a very complex territory west of the Rocky Mountains. And the same goes for Canada. East of the Rocky Mountains, the land becomes pretty flat. So we go into the Great Plains, which, as you can see here, are mid elevation, so they're not low or high elevations. But the thing is that the Great Plains are pretty flat. The elevation drops even further as you move east down to the Mississippi basin, so this low elevation until we meet the Appalachian Mountains. So this is the high mountains for the East Coast or in the East Coast of the US. They're not high in relation to the Rocky Mountains. The Rocky Mountains, you have several peaks over 14,000 feet and many over 10,000 feet. In the Appalachians, the highest peak, which is in North Carolina, it's only about 6,000, I believe, feet, and most of the mountains are around the 3,000 foot range. So much shorter, lower mountains, they are older as well, so more eroded. And then we have these lowlands, the Piedmont and the coastal plain here. That's the east coast of the United States is very flat, very low. It's called the coastal plain. We have Florida and Louisiana and some of these portions of other states in the coastal plain. So this kind of gives you an idea of what the physical environment looks like for North America. Here is the climate of North America. And again, we're using the codes for different types of climates. The A climates are tropical and humid climates, and we really don't have that in North America except for two places, one in Hawaii and one in the very southern tip of Florida. Okay, so those are considered tropical climates, but beyond that, there's no tropical climates in North America. Then we move on to these sea climates. Let's look at the sea climates. These are mild mid-latitude climates. So here in the southeastern United States, so the area that's normally considered the south, and extending actually all the way up to New Jersey here. This area has a mild climate, has a rainy climate. It rains all year, so year round. And the other sea climate is, of course, our climate, which is the Mediterranean climate, and then extending into the Pacific Northwest and Western Canada and Southern Alaska. We have the maritime climate, which is a cool but mild climate. It never gets very, very cold. Okay, of course, we have the desert climate or a very dry climate here in the southwest, and then the grassland type of climate moving up into some of the other parts of the western states. Then we have the D climates. D climates are cold climates, so very seasonal. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Very seasonal climates where it gets pretty cold here in Illinois, Wisconsin, these places. It gets pretty cold in the winter. It gets warm or even hot in the summer in this lower portion of the D climates, but it's cooler and cooler as you move north. Then the E climates are our tundra climates or polar climates. So we have tundra, and we also have the ice cap here in Greenland. These little graphs that you see here are called climate graphs, and they're pretty easy to read. They show precipitation. So here, for instance, Florida shows you that it gets pretty rainy in the middle of the year, like in the summer, and then the precipitation drops in the winter. And here is the temperature, the minimum and the maximum temperature. So you can see that in Florida, you don't have a big temperature range. It's pretty warm in the summer, and pretty warm in the summer, and it doesn't really get much colder in the winter. Whereas as you go, places like Philadelphia or other more what we call continental climates, the D climates, we see a pretty big range where it gets pretty cold in the winter and pretty warm in the summer. Here's the energy consumption of North America, kind of history of it. We see that back in the 1800s, well, most of the energy being used was wood, but towards the late 1800s that decreases and coal comes in, and in the following decades we have oil, which was discovered in the late 1800s. That begins to also be part of the mix. Coal is, for a little while in the early 1900s, is the main source of energy. Natural gas comes in the early 1900s, and hydropower, which is energy generated by rivers and dams, comes in the 1930s. So here, soon after or during the Great Depression, or during World War I, coal, natural gas, you have a mix of all these different sources. Notice that natural gas and particularly oil begins becoming a bigger and bigger fraction of the energy use. So coal drops, but then it comes back in the 70s, so it's remained a big part of the energy use in North America. Natural gas grows, oil grows, then it drops, then it grows again. So overall, the amount of energy used has increased, and also the different sources, but natural gas has become a bigger portion of what it used to be. And then we also have nuclear energy coming into the mix in the 70s and beyond. Here is a set of pictures before and after. So this picture, I believe, was taken in 1940, and this is from 2006. And basically what this is showing you a glacier, which is a big mass of ice, and we see a lot of this happening in Alaska, where what used to be covered with ice is now water, because the glacier, due to global warming, is melting. And this is seen all throughout the world. We see glaciers melting up in high mountains in the Andes, for instance, in South America. We see them melting in Alaska, in Greenland. The ice shelf is melting in Antarctica. So everywhere we go, we see a retreat of these big giant masses of ice that are now becoming water and becoming places that are not that don't have that big reservoir of fresh water that they used to have. Here's a little kind of history of European settlement in North America, divided into three periods. So the first period is the area that was settled by 1750. So this is what we call the 13 colonies. So these are the 13 original British colonies, including, New York and Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Carolinas, Georgia. So all these are part of the original settlement. In Canada, we see the original settlement happen around this river, the St. Lawrence and the St. Lawrence Valley. Then between 1750 and 1850, there's an expansion into the west and going into the Midwest region that has all this rich soil, crossing over the Appalachian Mountains. That was one of the original big barriers. And so, crossing the Mississippi. So this is our first expansion. And after that, we see an expansion into the rest of the country, including California and the West Coast. Here's a population map. Kind of, the previous map that shows you the expansion kind of helps explain why most of the population in North America is found in the eastern half of the US. Well, this is where, of course, European settlement began and then spread west. But another reason, and probably a more important reason why most of the population is found here, is that this area has enough precipitation, enough rain to support agriculture, whereas there's almost a longitudinal line here that is called the 100th, because it's the 100 degree longitude, the 100th meridian, beyond which there's not enough precipitation to support agriculture. There's enough to support grass and cattle, but not agriculture, until we get to the west coast where precipitation again increases. Here's a little history of immigration in the US. We see that in the early period, in the 1800s, we get mostly northern and western European immigration. Towards the late 1800s, we're getting southern and eastern European immigration. Then it drops during the Depression and the Second World War, and then picks up again. And then we see a big increase in immigration from Latin America and Asia beginning in the late 60s, early 70s towards the US. Here is a chart that shows the composition of the different ethnic groups and how it's changing. So we see that the percentage of white people is decreasing over time. The percentage of Latinos is increasing, or Hispanics, and blacks staying pretty much constant. Asians are increasing. So by 2050, we see that less than half of the population is white and 30% is Latino. So the changing demographics in North America.